Okay, we just get one more minute.
Sure.
I got multiple screens going here, but inshallah will go well.
Inshallah.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Owaiz, as well, we re-record it, and sometimes we upload it in YouTube, so some people might prefer to watch it at their leisure. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, siratal ladina an'amta alayhim, ghayra maghdubi alayhim wa dhalin, Ameen. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق وخاتم لما سبق نصر الحق بالحق هادي إلى صراط المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدر المقدار العظيم. So I want to welcome today. This is kind of section 2 of Muslim Money Matters, where we're actually focusing on kind of practical products that, you know, Muslims and Americans can kind of engage in America for investing or financing purposes as well as insurance. So today, I'm really honored to have a special guest, Owaiz Dadabhoy. I'm going to read his bio from Saturna Capital, but I know him personally. I've been knowing him for maybe close to a decade. He's a giant in the profession and in the industry of Islamic investing. And he's the director of Islamic investing for Saturna Capital, which is by far probably the largest and the oldest kind of Islamic investing opportunity anywhere in the world, across the Muslim majority countries, the Middle East, Malaysia. They are kind of leading the pack. And so Owaiz Dadabhoy is Director of Islamic Investing and Islamic Investing Group Manager. He joined Saturna Capital in August of 2008. Raised in Southern California, he earned a BA in Business Administration for Cal State University at Fullerton. He spent over 15 years with Wells Fargo and most recently a district manager in Long Beach. Prior to that, he was a senior sales director of Wells Fargo Wealth Management Group, where he had over 200 licensed brokers. In addition to his work, he's active in charitable and community activities, co-founding the Uplift Charitable Corporation in 2006. He's married with 2 children and enjoys spending time with his family and various outdoors activities. Hey, when you live in LA, you need to definitely take advantage of it. So, Owaiz, anything else you want to say just about your history, about your work?
No, I mean, I think that is good enough for now, right? So I've been in the financial services arena for 30 years plus, which we don't like to say because then it really dates us. You can basically figure out what my age is. But I started when I was 19, going to college, and I took a path towards financial services, and I never looked back.
Mm-hmm. Alhamdulillah. So the first section, just to give you a brief overview, we started with 3 kind of table stakes conversations. So the first conversation was finance and spirituality. Like, how do you combine both of those? Can they seem kind of opposite, right? Like we get kind of wrapped up in the world and we forget about spirituality, or we get into spirituality and we forget about the real world kind of dynamics of taking care of the family, saving for retirement, so on and so forth. And then we moved on to talk about healthy financial practices. I have a close friend named Shanann Dowda, who's a certified financial coach who helps people get out of debt and kind of stay out of debt and kind of get on the path of wealth building. And then last week we had someone you might have met before named Moneem. He came and gave us a Islamic Finance 101. So just a primer. We talked about investing a little bit, but I wanted to kind of take a broad view because I know we were having you and we were going to get into the details about investing. So that's where we've been, where we're going. I think we also want to talk about Islamic financing, Islamic home finance. That's one of the major things in America that people do to kind of build wealth and kind of secure their family. So we definitely are going to have maybe 1 or 2 sessions before Ramadan and then kind of take a break. But to kick it started, let me throw out what makes the amount of mutual fund, something someone will call an Islamic or Sharia compliant mutual fund.
Yeah, and by the way, so I know Shannon and of course Monim as well. We work well together, alhamdulillah. So, I think one of the things that you mentioned it in the beginning, one of your sessions was about, bringing them both together, right? Spirituality, investing, finance, and all that. And what I like to tell people, I like to remind them, especially if they're hearing it, for more than once, and then if they haven't heard it before, they need to hear it. We try to conduct ourselves. We fast during the month of Ramadan. We pray 5 times a day, inshallah. We finally make our Hajj, right? So we do all those things, and then we leave out certain things. It might be trying to figure out what's halal and haram in other activities, including food, right? But I think there's been a good revival of that spirit. But on the financial side, people really don't look at it too closely until they're reminded or some education is brought their way. So people live without having their finances being taken care of in a Sharia compliant or Islamically principled way. And they also die that way. So one of the topics you can also talk about maybe in this series down the road is how do you get your will or your trust set up? Because again, you've lived your life as a Muslim and as a believer and, a practitioner of the faith. And then what happens is we die and the money just goes to whoever you wrote as beneficiary instead of having a will which properly documents where the money's going to go. So with that, I forgot your question, but I thought I would throw that out there. So what was your question?
Yeah, so no, it's a good idea. Joe Bradford is someone that I know pretty well. He kind of grew up with my wife. So I'm planning on to bring him to talk about will and fara'id, because the fara'id is like, why would you live your whole life according to the Quran? And then this wealth that Allah gave you, you say, well, I'm just going to give it all to XYZ person, right? When Allah is really kind of called that out to us. But no, the question is like, what makes something permissible? What makes something Sharia compliant? But one of the things you said, I'm writing notes, is you said that people live their life according to Islam, but then they don't think about their money. And I think part of that is sometimes people are not even aware that they have options. Right. So if you're at Duke University or you're at AT&T or you're at another corporation, you think, oh, well, they're just putting me in the mid-market cap plus, bond fund, and I should just let it go, right? But there are options out there. So why is Saturna or Amana mutual fund, why is it, what makes it Sharia compliant?
Sure. So yeah, exactly right. I was going to start with that. So just about everyone that has an employer has a 401k. So, I think we're already investing and we're just picking from their menu, but you have an option. You can ask them to open up a brokerage account for you and then invest the way that you want to, because the funds that you're going to find in any company that is offering these funds, you're going to find that there are those companies that you don't want to invest in, either because they're dealing with interest directly, which is banking. It could be that they're dealing with haram food items as their primary business. And then it could be, gaming casinos and whatnot, right? Could be Anheuser-Busch in terms of alcohol. And so the first thing that we do as a mutual fund company when we're trying to do this the right way, and the scholars have put this together, as a listing of what can and cannot be done, is we take out those things that you and I know we don't want to invest in. We're not going to invest in Anheuser-Busch. We're not going to invest in a bank. We're not going to invest in, Wynn casinos or something like that. But that's the easy part. The next part is figuring out for the remaining companies, what kind of debt level do they have? It has to fall in within the guidelines. What kind of, secondary revenue is coming in? For example, is there a lot of money coming in from interest income? Are they making that one of their bigger businesses instead of deploying that money? Do they sell alcohol on the side? They're an airline, they sell alcohol, right? What is that going to do to the, whether that is a compliant stock to own or not? So we look at the outward, and then we look at the numbers behind the scenes as well to make sure something is compliant according to the scholars.
Okay. How do you all deal with, these companies are big and massive, right? So it's, trying to think about a company, like just say Apple, right? So Apple's a huge company, have revenue from different sources. They might sell maybe adult movies on their Apple TV Plus subscription. So how do you kind of, get really in there and kind of make strategic decisions about, because I can imagine if you take too strict of a kind of scope that, you'll only be investing in Disney, right? And if you take too loose of a scope, you're going to be investing in, everything. So what's that kind of line that you all have been able to determine, like how you can find stocks? And
I mean, some of the companies that we own, we've owned for 20 years plus, like Apple, for example. And so Apple has built many different businesses along the way. So the way you have to look at it is, what is their primary business? If their primary business is halal, selling retail items to people, that's perfectly fine, right? You can sell a phone, and a phone can be used in many different ways, but that's up to the user. A computer, some other type, Apple TV box, which can stream sports, right? And then as they layer on other services, so they might have now, I think, Apple TV broadcasting of some kind. So they're producing movies and shows as well. That is not their primary business, right? So that falls into that 5% rule. So if there is something that is not permissible, it might be very small, but it might be there, but we have to know what that is. So that's the genesis, that's the beginning of it. And then, as it develops, it's really using that 5% rule if it's not primary business. But I'll give you an example. I think you've heard this one before. We used to own Amazon when it was known as Amazon.com. So, we owned it many years ago, and we ended up selling it, even though we thought that the company was going to do very well, and it did. The reason we sold it is because its primary business is retail. It's selling products online. So they were selling books, and now they're selling, 100 million different things, as we know. But at some point, they started to sell alcohol, and alcohol was less than 5% revenue, but it's part of their primary business. And so there are some scholars that have said that, you might be okay to still have that because it's still less than 5%. But the way we looked at it is, we said, if it's part of their primary business, then we're going to take a stricter approach to it.
One of my examples that one of my mentors told me a while ago is that that the funds own Blockbusters, and an uncle from the community came, was like, yeah, you're owning Blockbusters. They have R-rated movies, and then they actually did the research. They called Blockbusters. They said, how much of your revenue comes from R-rated research? And this is before the era of big data. They're like, I don't know. And so they sold it just before Redbox and Netflix took them out. So it was serendipitous in terms of when you kind of leave some of those companies. So I think that's great, because I think you have to, we have to live in this world, right? So we can't take this approach that, if they even sell alcohol at all, we won't deal with them, because you will be so limited to what you deal with. But at the same time, if we're at a lake and there's someone, puts a cup of impurities in a lake, the whole lake can't be impermissible. Like, it's a lake, right? You just wave it around, go to somewhere else, so on and so forth, and still partake. So it's like you have to kind of really get in there and kind of, struggle with it, because if you're looking for 100% purity, you're going to be disappointed. And so, how do you feel that having, if you think of a traditional mutual fund, right? They have every security is available for them to invest in. So you will think that they can make better kind of return choices. But I think there's also an idea that says, when you're kind of restricted, if you look at different, not Sharia, but different kind of ethical, compliant mutual funds, so on and so forth, that oftentimes, limiting your scope can really kind of add to your investment analysis and decisions.
So I'll be truthful on this. I mean, it could be, I'm truthful on everything, but I'm just saying, even though you did not say, it's always going to be beneficial and it's never going to be harmful, that is the case. It can sometimes be harmful when you're not investing in a particular sector. So a way that a mutual fund portfolio manager will look at it is, if they say, we're going to buy small cap companies, which is not the largest value companies, right? So they wouldn't add Google into a small cap stock because it's worth over $1 trillion. So if that's not going to small cap, what is going into it? So, it's going to be smaller companies that have less total value. And, what's going to end up happening is that you're not going to be able to invest in everything, but you can invest in certain things. And so you just go after those, right? And I actually did a test a few years ago because there was an advisor in Houston who was looking to buy some individual securities for a doctor who I guess was like, one of those Pied Pipers, everyone knew him. And so when he would say something, the rest of the doctors would follow. So this advisor said, hey, look, I want to prove it to this guy that I can buy some things individual security wise. And if you can help me with this, then I will have his whole crew look at the amount of mutual funds. So we looked at it and we said, okay, well, if we're going to do that, how many companies do not have any interest income and no debt? Because that's what he wanted. No interest income and no debt, right? Mm-hmm. So in North America, so this is Canada and in America, there were 7 companies that had that. And only 2 of them were not financial companies. So the financial companies that, there were 5 of those and there were 2 that were not. So the 2 that weren't, you'd be able to invest in those, but that would be the only 2 companies that were publicly listed at the time that you could invest in. So, it's definitely something that the scholars have given a little bit of a give there, because if you don't have any give, then you're not able to invest at all. Yeah. And they use the rule that if you have less than 5% haram revenue, then it's not going to infect the entire entity, right? So that's part of the whole reasoning behind that.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the wisdom of the scholars, like having to make sure that they make a way for practicing Muslims to kind of find some investment. So we're going to take a kind of a step and go from the kind of background of what makes it Islamic to can you give us an overview of the kind of investing options that they have with the amount of funds?
Sure. So the first thing that, what I try to tell people to do is to look at what their financial goals are. Because if they don't have goals, they keep all of their money in a checking account and, they might have $70,000 and you ask them, so what is this money for? And they say, well, it's, emergency funds and I pay my rent through it. And if I have a problem in my house, if there's some kind of, the hot water heater goes out, I'm going to pay for that. And then when my son, Ahmad, goes off to college, I'll use the funds for that. And I'll probably bury myself with it, right? And, before that, I'll retire with that money. The problem with that is, first of all, it's not growing. So $70,000, 15 years ago is not $70,000 today. Just look at home prices and cars. So what you have to do is you have to figure out what are my goals, and then you try to achieve your goals through specific kinds of accounts that will also be tax beneficial potentially, right? Mm. So for example, if you have children, you might want to open up an education savings account, put money aside on a regular basis, and over time, it's going to benefit you and you're going to get to your goal. If you just stay at it. The other thing is some people are in high deductible health insurance plans, and that's what I have. And so I'm able to put in over $7,000 per year if I want to into a health savings account to save for my health expenses. And you can do this again in a tax beneficial way, which means that if you put that money in, you're going to get a tax deduction for the entire amount that you put in, which means you'll get some of that money back in your taxes. And then it grows without any taxes. And when you pull it out, it comes out without any taxes. It's the only triple tax advantaged account out there. And then of course, if you don't have a 401k at work, you got to have a retirement account, right? Because we know there's 40 million people getting Social Security, retirement Social Security income. And the average check in the United States is just over $1,500 per month, which is $18,000 a year. So that's just not going to cut it if you want to have any kind of realistic time, after working. So those are 3. And then, the other thing that I try to tell people is you can't just luck into going to Hajj anymore. When I went in 96, we calculated it because it wasn't a tour group or anything. It was $2,500 to $3,000 per each of us. And now it's $7,000 to $15,000. So you have to plan and save and invest and, try to do it that way.
So a HSA, health savings account, ESA for your children, 401k, not a 401k, IRA for yourself and for retirement, Also, give us just a high level, because I want to make sure people are familiar with the difference between a Roth and a traditional, because I think that's a question that gets asked a lot.
So with a traditional IRA, individual retirement account, whatever money you put aside now, if you qualify, meaning your income is below a certain threshold, you can take a tax deduction on that and get some of that money back today, right? So before April 15th, if you put money in for 2020 for last year, you can still do that today. You can open up an account online, invest the money, put in whatever money amount you want, up to $6,000, $7,000 if you're 50 and above, and you'll take the tax deduction. And conversely, if you have the Roth IRA, you're going to put in that money and not take a tax deduction. So why would anyone want to put money into a Roth IRA if it's not giving you a tax deduction? The reason is that if you're a good saver, I'll give you a quick example. You've probably seen this one before. From age 25 to 65, if you're putting in $1,000 a year, let's actually make it what the old IRA limit was, right? $5,500 a year. So if you put in $5,500 a year, which is about $460 a month, into an IRA, into a retirement account, like a 401k, for example, if you put this money in there until you're 65, you've put in a good chunk, right? $55,000 every 10 years, $220,000 for 40 years. If you assume a 7% annual average rate of return, I'm just assuming that number, not a guarantee of any sort, you'll end up with over $1.2 million, right?
Wow.
1.2 million. Now, ask yourself the question, when I'm pulling out that money, do I want it to be taxed or not taxed? Because if you have a traditional IRA or 401k, whatever money you pull out is going to show as income that year and you will be taxed on it. If you choose a Roth IRA or Roth 401k, whatever money's in it is going to be free of tax, completely free of tax. That's the difference. So the way to figure this out for yourself is, if you are in a very high tax bracket, you're getting crushed by taxes, you might want to consider the traditional IRA, traditional 401k. If you're not, or you're early in your career, put the money aside in the Roth, because you're not getting hammered by taxes. So you're going to enjoy the benefits of the tax break later on in life.
So can you have one of each, or do you have to pick?
You can have both traditional and Roth, just as long as the total amount you put in every year does not cross that hurdle of 6,000 in an IRA or 19,500 in a 401k.
And so one of the questions that we had earlier, I solicited some questions earlier. And so if say you have a 401k at your job, you have your HSA, and you even have a college savings plan, what is the opportunity? Are there other opportunities to just have a emergency fund account that's also invested in a Saturna or a Mana?
Yeah. So what I would say about emergency funds is, when you need that money, you don't want to look at whether the market was up or down that year, that month, that day. When you need emergency funds, you need it right away. And so what you want to do is keep 3 to 6 months worth of what your normal expenses are in a bank account. Okay. So that's the beginning. So once you've crossed that, then that's extra money besides your ongoing operating money and your emergency funds. That's what you want to invest.
And so, but there's an account for that. There's not an IRA, not an HSA, but there's just a kind of standard.
It's a regular investment account. Yeah, you can just open up a regular investment account for yourself, and start it with $250, and then you can contribute on a monthly basis, or just send in a check or transfer it online, however you want to do it.
Okay. So I think we're kind of building the whole piece of this pie. So we have the Islamic Sharia compliant part. Now we have the kind of accounts part. Next I want to go on to tell us about your funds, right? So, I know we have at least 4 different options. So can you give us a brief overview about the 4 different funds?
So I'm going to read something before. It's a disclosure, since you're asking me specifically, that any performance numbers I give, and even the example of the 7% assumed rate of return, they're not guarantees of any kind. I'm not representing that whatsoever. Every mutual fund that you purchase, every stock that you purchase, every bond, which are not Sharia compliant, any sukuk, which are, any of those things are going to carry risk. So just know that, you can try to mitigate some of the risk, but there is going to be risk in the portfolio. That's why you can enjoy a potential nice return over time. So we have 4 different funds, and the first one started back in 1986. It's called the Amana Income Fund. And we only own companies there that pay a dividend. And so if you think about it, a company that's just starting off, or maybe 5-6 years into it, they have irregular types of revenue. They may not have enough revenue. They can't pay a dividend, right? So the companies we own in that fund are blue chip type companies. And these companies are going to, pay a regular dividend every quarter. That means they have revenue coming in. They're a cash cow. Anytime we add a new company to that particular fund, that the dividend yield has to be higher than the S&P 500 dividend yield, the average. So if you take all 500 of the largest companies in the United States that are in the S&P 500 and you take their average dividend yield, the company that we're purchasing to put into the fund has to have a higher yield than that. So we're picking hopefully the best of the best companies. Mm-hmm. That's the first fund, 1986. So it has about $1.5 billion, so about $1.5 billion in assets right now. The next fund that we have
is with a B. Just in case y'all didn't hear that, as the billion with a B.
Yeah. That's what time in job will help you with, right? Having all those years to put money, to collect money from investors, and also, alhamdulillah, having nice returns along the way. So then you have the growth fund, which started in 1994. We started this fund because our clientele was telling us we want to invest more in technology companies. And they were right. I mean, that's when really it started to take off. And so currently about 47 to 48% of the holdings are in technology companies, and about 20% is in healthcare. So those are 2 hot areas for the last 10 years or so. And then we spread across the rest of it into different sectors that you can pick growth companies out of. And that one has over $2 billion in assets. We started the Developing World Fund, which invests in emerging markets. You had Monim on, he's the portfolio manager of that particular fund, of that particular fund. And that started in 2009, and that is around 60 million or so. And then we have the Participation Fund, which we started in 2015. We did this in order to have some asset allocation, right? So if you have a 70-year-old father or 82-year-old father or whoever, or mother, and they have an old 401k, they've built up their assets, and now they're starting to use some of that money. They don't want all of that money to be directly in the stock market, because if you have a bad year or 2 years in the market, you're putting your entire portfolio at risk. So what they would do is they would put a portion of this into the Participation Fund, and we invest in Sukuk, which has bond-like characteristics, but instead of being debt-backed, they're actually asset-based or asset-backed.
So, I think that was a great point. It was somewhere I was going to go to next. And so it's a perfect segue. So how do customers figure out their asset allocation? Do you all offer a tool, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately we do. Because now that we have the Participation Fund, we were actually able to build that tool just so you can invest your money into Amana funds, right? Mm-hmm. So people can go on our website, amanafunds.com. That's without an H, AMANA funds.com. And right on the front page, about halfway down, there's something called the Amana Fund Selector. And if they click there, they can take a 5-minute quiz. At the end of it, it will propose a suggested portfolio for them. And so if they come across as a very conservative investor, 70% would be allocated into the Participation Fund, non-stock, right? And 30% of it, because you still want some growth, would be in the stock funds. Conversely, if you come across the other way, right, as a very aggressive investor, you might have 90% plus in stock funds, and then 10% or less in the Sukuk fund or the Participation Fund.
Can you give us, the audience, just so we have an idea, can you give us some historicals of like where has been the return for the different funds?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And while I do that, I'll mention that the Participation Fund has about 150 million in it now. it's, we have a fund that's a 1.5 billion, another one that's 2 billion. But since inception, this is the fastest growing fund that we've ever launched, because the opportunity or the desire from people to have this kind of fund was so great that when we launched it, we had great participation in it. So I'm going to go through.
Yeah, I wrote a paper about bond-like investment opportunities for Muslim Americans when I was in Malaysia, because it was, that was 10 years ago.
Right.
And I think there might be one offering for like a very small company, but and you also knew that, knowing the demographics of people I wanted to help, my mother-in-law, folks in the community who were looking to retire in the next 5 to 7 years,
right.
You wanted them to be something where, 2009, we saw a wild swing. And so you wanted them to have something that says, hey, look, you don't have to worry that you have to work another 2 years, but you also know that you're not going to get, 10 or 12% growth. So when I saw that, I was definitely excited. I was still a little too young to put my money in a participation fund, but, just having that as an opportunity was, I think it was a game changer.
And it's not only for people that are 70, 80 years old. I mean, you can, if you want to get into to investments, you've never done it before, you don't know what the stock market risk is all about, you can put a portion in the participation fund or all of it, right? And not have that stock market risk whatsoever. Once you begin to learn how investments work, then you can start to allocate your money into different funds. So I pulled up the numbers just so I can give you some flavor of this. Again, no guarantees, every year is different. The growth fund is the strongest performer over the last 10 years. It has 14% exactly average return over those last 10 years. So if you look at December 31st, 2010 to December 31st, 2020, that's the time period we're looking at. If you would have put in 10,000 in December 2010, you would have just over 38,000 now. So it's a quadrupling in terms of your overall return. The 1 year return, this is February 26th of last year to the February 25th of this year, is almost 42%. So actually it's over 42, it's 42.19%, which beats the S&P 500 return. And we've already taken out the expense ratio. So it would have been even slightly higher. So we've beaten the S&P 500 return the 1 year by 11%. And over the last 10 years, we've beaten it by more than 0.5%, including our expense ratio. So that's one. And then I'll just give you the participation fund. I won't go through all four. People can find it. Again, on our main page, you'll find all four funds. You can click on any one and you'll find the returns there. So if you look at the amount of participation fund, which does not have stock holdings, is Sukuk. Last year, 2020, the full year return was 5.5%. The average over the last 5 years is 3.5% approximately. And the 1 year, so you're looking at, February 26th to February 26th, about 4.5%. But overall, 2020 was 5.5%. So if we get a 2.5%, 3.5%, 4.5%, 5.5% return, we're happy with that. That's what we want. This is not meant to get you a 33% return like the growth fund did last year, right? It's not meant to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Just so follow-up question on that. And, I think I was advising a young lady earlier this week. So I know there's two options when you have an account, right? Are the dividends automatically reinvested across HSA, ESA, 401k?
Yeah, so those are called qualified accounts, meaning that they're qualified for special tax consideration. It means you're not getting taxed along the way, right? So if you have money in any of those, health savings account, education, retirement account, if you get a dividend of, let's say, $100 that year, you don't pay any tax on it. But if you bought a stock and it's not within any of these particular kinds of accounts, or a mutual fund, and you receive that same $100 dividend, you're going to pay tax that year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so you're going to get that special tax benefit of not having to pay. And when you sign up for any of those qualified accounts, it is automatically reinvested.
Is automatically, and it has to be, or is that an option?
It has to be, because on any of those accounts, you have to select that you want to make a withdrawal, because there's special rules. So when you're making a withdrawal from an education savings account, the thing the person's going to tell you is, do you have receipts for what you're pulling out? So for example, I just, a couple of months ago paid for my daughter's college. I wrote a check, paid it, and then I called and I said, hey, I want this money. So they said, okay, do you have a receipt for that, an invoice that you received? So just in case the IRS decides to audit you, then you have a folder that says, yes, I received this money, but I did pay it, because you're not paying taxes on it. So you have to verify that with
But for the standard account, you can choose whether or not to have the distributions sent to you, or to kind of reinvest it.
That's right. If you just open up a regular investment account, you can do that.
Okay. So just one particular question, in our community, we have people who are often retiring, overseas, especially in Senegal, home of Sheikh Mahi. And so they want to put money away and kind of get that kind of stream of income. So how, because I know for the growth, these are not dividend companies, but if you're investing in like the participation and income, how regular are the kind of dividends kind of distributed?
So the participation fund pays monthly, and the income fund pays twice a year.
Okay.
But let's say you have somebody that has $500,000 in their retirement account. They don't need to just receive the dividends, because that may not be enough to live off of. What they could do instead is they could have a schedule. They can say, at the beginning of the year or any time of the year, they can fill out something saying, I want this much money to come out of my account every month, send it into my bank account. So, if you have a $500,000 account, and let's say you go with this assumption of 7% average return over your life, right? So that means you can take out $35,000 per year, and most likely your $500,000 is going to remain $500,000, because you only took out the return, right? Last year, if you had unbelievable returns, you could take out more if you wanted to. So this way you can take out more, you can live the lifestyle you want to, and you can still have enough until you're 100 years old. And then you can leave it as a legacy to your children and grandchildren. And, you can endow an organization and whatnot. And you can take out more than that. Like, for example, if you have that $500,000, you have a schedule, but then you need to buy something large. You need to have $100,000 to buy a second home or something, and up in the hills somewhere. You can take it out, no problem. It just means that your $500,000 is no longer going to be $500,000, right?
Okay, so you can schedule distributions, but the participation fund pays monthly. I think now I want to move into some general question and answers that kind of come through.
Sure.
What do you think about ETFs, right? Are there Islamic ETFs, and how do you think they kind of compare to managed funds?
Well, I mean, you have to take a look at the returns. I know there was a couple of them that had come by that were based out of Seattle, and they went defunct, because the expectation is that you're going to have low expense ratios, because it's not actively managed, right? So let's say you have, okay, so again, we talked about the S&P 500. Again, it's just basically 500 companies put into what's called an index. And so if Hood wants to create a fund and call it the Hood S&P 500 fund, what he would do is he would collect money from people, and then when the money comes in, he would equally allocate the money into each of these different companies. And so he's not having to do any thinking. It just, when one company comes out of the S&P 500, another one goes in, he's going to sell that one and buy the new one, because sometimes they do take them out because they became smaller and another one became bigger. So in that case, you're not actively managing anything. You're just trying to get the return of that particular index. However, when you're doing it in an Islamic fashion, you're not going to be in the whole S&P 500, because you can't buy all of those companies. So it's not going to be a fair representation, right? You're going to have a smaller number. Like I said, like I just showed you the growth fund over the last 10 years has beaten the S&P 500 by more than 0.5%.
And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. Like,
yeah, and it includes our our expense ratio as well. So it would have been probably about 1.3% higher than the S&P 500. But we have the ongoing annual expenses that come out of the portfolios. So what that means is that you can beat the indexes, and if you do, you get rewarded, right? So that's why we have over $2 billion in that particular fund. People value that fund.
So and that's an excellent part of the question. Can you kind of educate us on how the fee structure for mutual funds? I feel like in the last few years, especially with ETFs and other kind of market entrants, even mutual funds had to take a different approach at fees.
Yeah, so the way it works is I used to work at a company before where if somebody came into one of our locations and wanted to buy a fund, they would be asked whether they want to pay upfront, along the way, or at the end. All right. Mm-hmm. And what that means is A, B, and C share classes. So an A share means if I give you $10,000 to invest, you're going to take out 5.5% upfront. So 10,000 is now 94.50. And I like to say it this way. I like to, you have to claw your way back up to 10,000 before you make any return, right? Mm-hmm. So usually people will say, oh, I don't want to do that. That's too much. Even though you had a great return, I don't want to pay you 5.5% up front. So they'll say, okay, well, the other way is, if you take out the money early, we'll charge you on a scale. So if you pull out the money in 1 year, we'll charge you 6%. If you wait 2 years, we'll charge you 5%. So that's not attractive either. So the other way is you can not have the front end or the back end fee, but we'll charge you a higher amount every year. Okay. The one that's going to charge you on the front end and on the back end, they are going to charge you on an annual basis as well, something else, right? The expense ratio. But the one in the middle that I'm talking about is not going to charge you on the front or back, but they'll charge you a higher rate every year. So you kind of don't win. Now, the Amana funds were started in 86. The idea came about in 84. It was started, the idea was started by Muslim community members that, I'll just say it, I mean, they had already made it for themselves. So, they were trying to look out for the rest of the community, and just like the other organizations that they helped start as well that are still in around these days, helping people, right? So what ended up happening is they said, we're going to have a no-load fund. That means we're not going to charge on the front end, on the back end, and we're not going to raise the fee on the expense ratio to an astronomical amount, even though we're not collecting front end or back end fees. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Amana funds are all no-load funds.
And so that's pretty exceptional.
I mean, I think it was pretty forward thinking back then. I mean, they could have charged more and, said everyone, the Amana funds and the company managing it could benefit more. But I don't think it would have grown to this point. I mean, it's such a fair way to deal with people that it's actually a superior way to deal with people. And other funds are now coming in line with that. There's more and more.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, there's a lot more of no-load funds, but I don't think I think they were it seems like they were kind of pressured to be no-load funds.
Right. Why give up the money if the industry doesn't make you give up the money, right?
Yeah, competition is not forcing you.
I used to, when my father used to have a brokerage account, I was 14, 15. And I said, hey, I'd like to trade some of these stocks for you, right? And he said, okay, go ahead. So I would call in and say, I'd like to buy 100 shares of XYZ company. And I'd be speaking to a broker on basically like near the floor of the stock exchange, right? Like there was actual people that would pick up the call, but they would charge you $40 to $50 a trade. And you wouldn't buy it at $42.20. You would have to bid, and there was an ask. So it might say it's 42 1/8 all the way to 42 1/2, and you're going to get your price somewhere in between, right? And so there's somebody making money on that, and they're making $40 to $50 per trade. In some cases, over $100 a trade. Now, because people have come about, technology has come about, all of those things have changed. And I think that's why a lot of fund companies have also changed in the way they charge.
So like you're stealing my questions. Are you looking at my notes?
I didn't have it.
So the first thing is the brokerage account. Does Amana actually offer brokerage accounts for
We do.
customers?
Yeah,
Okay.
so
For
we
customers
added
or
that
just
feature.
institutions?
Yeah, we added that feature because people want to keep things all in one place. So we said, we'll go ahead and offer that. We actually don't make money on that, and we're not the cheapest. So you might pay $15 a trade, whereas if you went to some other place that might charge you $5 a trade, if you're a heavy trader. So if you're a heavy trader, that's what you're looking for, we're probably not the right place, because literally we're charging 15 and not making anything on it, right?
Mm.
But it's something that we do because we need the brokerage account as well. Now that we have, different kinds of ways to invest money for people, we use our own brokerage account to do that for people, and we offer it to our clients as well.
So the brokerage account works as, like, if I have my 401k there, if I have an HSA, and then I can have a basically just a regular brokerage account where I can say buy my own Apple stock right out, so on and so forth.
That's right. That's how you would do that.
And can sell it. And
I think where the brokerage account comes in really well, I've actually done this for a few of these organizations just over the last week. I mean, it's ongoing. It's pretty much here all the time now, is offering the brokerage account to nonprofit organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Because when a nonprofit has one, let's say you bought the Apple shares at $50, now they're $120, and it's worth $15,000. And your masjid has like this huge fundraiser, you want to give all 15,000, it would be better for you to transfer the shares in kind to the masjid if they have a brokerage account. So they receive all of the funds that you want to send them, and you don't have to sell them and take the capital gains hit, no tax. And when the masjid then gives you a donation receipt, they give it to you for the full amount.
Yeah, but when you have a loss, do you still get to write off your loss if you sell it? If you bought it for 20,000 and it's worth 18,000 and you donate it.
So the rule on this is that you would only make the transfer if you have a gain and if you've held it for more than a year. Okay. If you have not, so if you bought some stock and it was worth 15,000 and now it's worth 10,000, it would be better for you to sell the stock, take the loss so you can get the deduction, and then.
So the second question that asked is, for your children, there was a question that came through. It says, what account can you open? Two-part question. What account can you open for your children that's not for them for college, but say, for a wedding or their adulthood, so on and so forth, needing some money after college, so on and so forth. And the second part of that is that, do you all have something in place for, like you said, that your father does? I know a lot of, my brother, he wants his sons to kind of understand what equity is about. Like, not just buying Hasbro, not just buying Beyblades, but buying Hasbro, not just buying an iPhone, but buying Apple stock. So do you all have something, for children to kind of learn about, stocks and investing?
So the way you can do it is the way I did it. So, you can open up a minor account for your children. It's the same kind of account that you would open, as we were talking about before, a regular investment account. Is just now it would be called a minor account. Just like if you go to the bank and you open up a savings account for yourself, it has the same functionality as a savings account for your child, but it's called a young savers account, right? So this has a specific ruling in government code. It's called the Uniform Gift to Minor account, whether it's a bank account or an investment account. So it'll be under the child's social security number. You'll still be on the account. Once they turn 18, then it becomes the child's account. The benefit of this particular account, you can save for anything, invest for anything. And then when you withdraw the money, you can withdraw for anything, not for education. You could do it for the wedding, like you said, first car, what have you, or set them up if you invest long enough, maybe a down payment for their first house. So, the benefit also is that there's a tax benefit here. If you're receiving dividends on that, or if you bought and sold something, as long as it's less than, I believe, $1,050 per year, it goes into what's called the kiddie tax rule. And of course, consult with your tax accountant. I'm just giving you some helpful education here that you can go back to your accountant with, but that shouldn't be taxed. Whereas if you open up a regular account for yourself, even $5 or $15 of dividends is going to be taxed, right? Which is fine. I mean, you made money, so you're going to pay some money. We'd rather not, but we have to. But with the minor account, you don't have to unless you hit over a certain threshold.
So dividends are taxed only when you withdraw, not if they're reinvested.
Well, dividends on a regular investment account or a minor account are taxed every year because they're not qualified accounts.
Okay, definitely. And so about learning, so you said that account they can have, but that's still not a brokerage account. So they're still buying the amount of funds for that. So we really don't have a kind of learning.
Well, you can open up a brokerage account and, show your kids how you do that as well. But there's probably some other applications that you can use to buy $20 worth of stocks here and there. If you're trying to teach them that way.
You can't buy Amazon.
Yeah, you can. But you can buy a portion of Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can.
The way that I showed my kids is I just kept them in tune with what I was doing, and I showed them how growth occurs. And so they ask, well, what is a mutual fund? I mean, I'd rather have them learn about the mutual fund early on and then discover individual stock trading later. Because I often tell people, if your serious money should be going into serious investments, whereas you might have 10% of your money you don't care about too much.
Everybody wants to play the market. Everyone has a hunch. They were like, I love this peanut butter. This peanut butter is going to blow up. I got to invest in this peanut butter. And it's like, no. Or some people, my brother, he had like an 800% on he was buying a Tesla, but he's like, before I buy a Tesla, I need to invest in it. He made 800%. So, so is there a minimum age for a 401k?
Well, you have to be working.
Okay.
Right. So whatever the work age is, if you're working at an employer, then you can do it. But we also offer 401ks to employers, to nonprofits, to Masajid, to everybody. We do that.
So is there a minimum age for an IRA? That's what I meant.
Again, if you have income, you can put money into an IRA.
Okay.
I don't remember the actual age because there is some kind of minimum there. Even if you have, different kind of income, if it's not from an employer, you can categorize that as income as well and put that as well. So, but if you qualify for a Roth IRA, if your income is not above a certain limit, you can actually put money there as well and save it for your children. Let's say you already have a 401k, you're investing enough in there, and you say, I don't have an IRA account. Let me do this for my kids. I make 120,000 joint income, so I qualify for Roth IRA. You put money in there, you can pull out whatever you put in without any tax or penalty. The only thing you can't pull out before 59 and a half is the growth. So that's another way to save for your children and to show them, how to do it.
So in terms of having a regular account, can you just put what's in your regular account in your Roth because you can pull it out?
Yeah, you can. The only reason you wouldn't do that is you don't have any retirement savings. Because, again, I try to tell people, you have to have retirement savings now, right? Whether it's in a retirement account or not, you have to have enough for retirement because the government's not going to take care of you there. It's just not going to happen. So some people I know, they've purchased homes. They're fortunate. They have 3-4 homes, but they bought them years ago and they were fortunate with it. That's their retirement, right? The income from that is their retirement. But most people, if you're just starting off, you can't go buy a house right away. You have to have a down payment to qualify, but you can start to invest in a mutual fund and build up your account and then use that money to buy a home.
Yeah, it's so powerful because it's, I tell folks all the time when I'm talking to them, they're like, I want to save a little bit for my kids' education. I want to save for this. I'm saying, and I tell you, there's no way to fund your retirement other than what you do. And I think, for people who are under the baby boomers age, baby boomers had a deal that will probably never be offered again, right? Pensions are not coming back.
Exactly.
I wish they were.
Exactly.
But it's something that's not coming back. So the only thing you're going to have is what you actually put in there for yourself. And that's so right. And one of the things I say to teenagers is that every decision, that every good thing that I experience and every challenge that I experience is from a decision I made 10 or 15 years ago.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so when you're retiring, that the money that you have is the money that you saved 10 or 15 years ago. Not only the money that you saved 10 or 15 years ago, the money that has been working for you while you're actually working, like make your money work for you. Owaiz, this has been a very kind of educational. I think we went through, everything on Mana. I just want to close with you giving us some advice just in terms of, what this community needs to kind of understand about investing, retirement, just some kind of words of wisdom before we close. You have 30 years of experience in this industry, so yeah. I'm sure you have something really meaningful to impart to us.
Well, I might have already given it away, but first of all, let me go back for a second. So you can open up an IRA for a minor, but the parent would open it as a custodial IRA. So people can look into that as well if they want to do that. I think the biggest thing is to take your finances seriously. Sit down and take some time for yourself and say, what do I need to accomplish down the road for my family? There's situations where people can't even be buried because they don't have enough money. And it's not because they didn't earn money. It's because they didn't do anything to put some of it away for down the road for their family. So the number one thing I like to talk about is goal setting, financial goal setting. And just as long as you have a goal, and if you try to implement that goal, you're going to get some good results out of it. It doesn't matter if you buy a Mana mutual funds or if you buy individual stocks or you buy a home or you buy anything else that there is a value. The idea is be consistent, right? So, what I was telling you before about the 25-year-old, if they start saving $5,500 a year into an IRA with a 7% assumed rate of return, they'll get to 1.2 million. But if they wait for 10 years, they missed out on putting in 55,000, right? $5,500 a year for 10 years that they missed out on. They're going to end up with $560,000 at retirement, half. So Einstein is attributed to have said that the greatest force in the universe is the power of compounding. And the Chinese have a proverb that goes back to what you were saying. They ask a question in this proverb: when is the best time to plant a fruit tree? And when I ask that question, people say, oh, the spring, or some time of the year. The actual answer is 15 years ago, right? So because it takes time for the persimmon to really get great. It takes time for that orange, that citrus to really produce the best fruit. But the second best time is today. Mm-hmm. And, like if you haven't started, there's no issue with starting later. That's fine. Because if you're not 25, if you're now 45, you're not making the same income that you were when you were 25. If you were making, $8 an hour back then, and now you're making $42 an hour now, you can put in a lot more to catch up. Mm-hmm. So plan, and then execute the plan, and then, communicate with others and share that information with others, because they will all come back and thank you later. I've told so many of my family and friends that weren't putting money into a 401k, just do it, right? Just do it. Put as much as you can. 5-10 years later, they're saying, this is amazing. Like, we never envisioned this. We offer 401ks for a lot of nonprofits. Even though I don't like taking money out as a loan from a 401k, you can do that. And I know a number of them that bought homes because of that, because they could borrow against their own 401k and take, $50,000 and have a down payment for their home. They never even envisioned they could do that. But once they got the education, the information, they took that first step. And that's what you got to do.
And what I'm going to say is that, I'm a customer, I'm a fan, of Amana for almost over 15 years. Dr. Mirza is a mentor of mine. But the reason that I think Amana speaks to me is that, even in Islamic finance, there are things that are kind of harder than even in traditional finance, like home financing. It's harder. It is. I worked at a home financing company for 2 or 3 years. But it's like the easiest, and usually when it's harder, it might be more expensive, right? And when I'm out there talking to, fellow Muslims, they were like, oh, the COBM is too hard. It's too high. The cost of being Muslim is too high. And it's like, this was the company that it was like, hey, look, in terms of a return, it's right, people have all types of returns, right? But it gives you a good solid return. Yeah. It's Sharia compliant, and they're as professional as any company that you'll see in the market. And so it's just really like a kind of no-brainer. And so, I also want to say, we want to thank you for this kind of service that you're providing to this Muslim community. And so even to piggyback on that, I think we didn't mention this, is that they will tell you what zakat that you owe on your investments. So they'll send you a letter that says, for these particular investments, you owe this much of zakat. And they just, and Merrill Lynch is not going to do this. Fidelity is not going to do this. And they do it. And, I know that they're doing it because they know who their customers are, and they want to kind of give their customers something that's beneficial. Is there anything else that you want to kind of, because I know that was one thing that, that I appreciate every year.
Yeah, no. So and then we have purification. So some people say, look, yeah, there is interest income that this company is collecting. How do I make it even more pure, right? So we have purification calculator on our website as well. The beautiful thing is, though, let's say you have a local butcher, right? That's giving you halal meat. It's charging you a lot more, maybe, right? Maybe the quality is not as great. Maybe it is.
Maybe it is.
And so,
you got to find out when it is, right?
So the local community outside of the Muslims are not going to go there. And so the business is always limited, and then they never clean up their act and make it a beautiful place because they never get enough money to do that. But if they were able to, like you said, have a good product, price it right, don't overprice, try to do the best you can to lower cost. And that's what we've been doing. I mean, before I joined the company, our expense ratio was 1.7%, right? Because if you don't have enough assets, you can't have enough to run the organization. So now, like in the case of the participation fund, it's down to 0.63 for the institutional share class. That's the lowest one that we have. So, 50% of the money that has come into the amount of mutual funds is not from Muslims. It crosses over, right? Other people are buying it. Anyone in the investment space will go and say, oh, I like that one because of the return or because of the ethical standards or what have you. So I think that's a beautiful thing that we can take.
That's a testament.
We can take that. That could be, a case for a nonprofit to try to cross over and not just be for Muslims. It could be for the butcher, not just to be for the Muslims. You limit yourself, right? Try to make it where your restaurant, even if you don't have a Muslim client, is going to be full because the food is great and the price is great. And
the atmosphere is great.
Exactly.
And it's, it's for everyone, right? But I think that's why, but I think that's the key. Like, it's for everyone, but it knows its value, right? It's for everyone, but it's not saying, oh, let's sacrifice on this. Sacrifice on the standard because we have folks who are Muslim and folks of other faiths. So it's like, no, this is, this is kind of, this is our strategy.
Imagine that restaurant that is trying to cross over, and they start to take, they say, most like 95% of our customers are not Muslim. They don't care about halal. So why don't we just go to the local store and buy the chicken and beef and whatever? We don't even know if it was mixed with the ground beef. It could be mixed with something else. We don't know. We don't care because, these people don't care what they're eating, but there are certain people that do care. And you said that you're a Muslim running this business, right? So it's the same thing with us. If we start to give a little bit and we're the industry leader, that could have an effect on the entire industry. People would lose faith. We would lose assets. I wouldn't have a job, right? So we have to do it this way for the betterment of all of us.
Definitely. Well, always, we have an hour, and I think we asked all the questions that they sent. And, look, I've been a customer for a while, and I've learned a lot. And so I really kind of appreciate it. I think it's very valuable. And we'll just close out with Surah As, but thank you for coming. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa al-asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu s-salihati wa tawassaw bil-haqq wa tawassaw bis-sabr. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always. Alhamdulillah. Take care, everyone. Salam alaikum, Sister Haja. Thank you for joining us.
Alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah.
For folks who's watching later on. Did you have a question or any comment, Sister Haja?
No, because I am senior and I am retired and disabled. So there's not too much more I can ask from what he has told me. I'm going to be relocating in the next year to Ghana. So I guess everything is in place. We built from the ground up a home over there.
Nice.
So I guess I'm straight. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. Well,
and I do have my will. I have my will already, and I do have some funds, saved with my husband. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Thank you, brother.